As we spawn into our world, we are prompted with a mission. Night is approaching and we should go and find our dog. Using our first-person controls, we are able to inspect and rotate in the scene, and we notice our house behind us in the forest setting we are in. We further observe a man along the pathway. Perhaps he can provide us with some useful information. As we approach him, we are able to interact with him using the E control, and he informs us of barking noises along the path, as well as a warning to not stray from the path. What you have seen here is one of a class of many interactive objects we have implemented in our game.
We continue down the path using the keys W, A, S and D to transform the player's camera and player model in the scene. Pressing the F key, the camera is transformed into the third-person perspective, where we can see the player model's walking animation playing while we are holding down the W key. We animated this walking animation ourselves by transforming each independent part of the model's legs and arms over 100 keyframes. You will also notice the minimap in the top right corner, which is an ortho camera that follows the player's camera and model as a child, showing the player's surroundings at all times. Ahead of us, we see a campsite to explore, where we can hopefully find more clues about our missing dog.
In the camping site seen here, we have extensively made use of principles of hierarchical modeling in order to place the various objects you see. The tent, table and campfire are all children of the campsite, with each having their own respective children. We notice two sources of light in the scene. A point light emanating from the fire, as well as a spotlight from the torch on the table, each interacting with the ground and table respectively based on their various material properties. We are able to pick up the torch in order to illuminate our path. The fire makes use of an imported particle system, with the firewood being made and textured completely by us. We also observe the newspaper on the table, with a rather grimacing hint towards where our dog might be, which was further made and textured by us from scratch. The tent displays our usage of our physics model in which we are prevented from simply phasing through the tent, and should instead use the M control bound to it to do so. Upon entering the tent, we observe the objects inside the tent, including the blanket, photo, and notebook. We are again able to inspect these objects, and doing so brings up this magnifying glass. This is a cool effect that we had implemented utilizing frame buffering and several render passes, applying a simple Gaussian blur effect to our scene which was passed through as a texture, which then places the scene out of focus and then renders the magnifying glass with the object in front of it in focus, allowing us to rotate it using mouse controls for inspection. We also pick up the notebook as well, taking note of the information we observe on it, as it may provide useful information later on.
We now exit the tent and notice that it has become nighttime, meaning that the ambient light in our scene and the spotlight that was the sun in our scene have been dimmed uniformly until their light intensity is 0. We now only have the spotlight within our torch model, which was initially a child of our campfire scene or unit, and has now become a child of the camera for the player's perspective to illuminate our path.
With regards to our terrain, the pathway was modeled by us in Blender through extruding a simple plane geometry along a Bezier curve and applying diffuse and normal textures to it. This path was then pieced together to fork in various directions, producing the results seen on screen. In terms of the forest ground, we have applied diffuse and normal textures found online onto a plane geometry, as well as made use of techniques such as bump mapping in order to produce the results seen in the presence of light. Additionally, we have applied simplex noise to add random disturbances in the terrain's height for a more natural effect. For the trees, we have placed emphasis on realism while keeping performance optimal. We have utilized low poly models which we have made in Blender, with image textures applied to simple planes for the foliage and normal and diffuse maps for the bark of the trees. This utilizes alpha blending to allow for transparency in the images to display the shape of the trees, and with the decaying light, the overall atmosphere created by the trees becomes increasingly spooky.
We deliberately start our game during daytime to instill a false sense of safety in the player, which we can progressively eliminate throughout the course of the game through the use of sound events such as the whispers played previously and more to come, the terrain such as the fog that can be observed towards the edges of the player's peripherals, and the lack of lighting, which can be used to instill a sense of fear of darkness. We now come across a split in our path, where we must examine the evidence presented to us and choose which path we should follow.
Perhaps the path with the paw prints is a bit too obvious for us, and so instead we choose the right pathway. Continuing along this pathway, we see that indeed our instinct was correct, and we have found some clues. The shovel, skeleton, blood and collar was modeled together as a single unit. Upon inspection of the collar, we see a familiar name. Is this skeleton perhaps a familiar furry little friend of ours? Not just yet. We follow along this pathway determined to find our dog. The collar model and blood puddle were modeled by us, and observe the glow effect in the paw prints, which was achieved through adding emissive lighting to it, which you'll further notice in the picture-in-picture ortho map in a few moments. Our player has now made a choice and continues along this pathway. What we have seen here is our loose condition. The screen that displayed was another cool effect made using frame buffering and render targets, in which we had passed the original frame buffer as a texture to another fragment shader, which distorted the color of each pixel as a function of time, creating the sudden blood effect.
Since we chose the wrong path, our game has now been forcibly restarted and we are back at the beginning where we must progress back to where we were. Another thing to note, once it is nighttime and the player is deep enough within the forest, if the player disregards the warning given to them by the character in the beginning, and rather chooses to abandon the path and explore on their own, then the player will be killed by some creature within the forest and lose the game. Skipping ahead, we arrive back at the split in our path again. Learning from our past mistakes, we now follow the path on the left, which has extruded paw prints which we modeled in Blender ourselves, and hierarchically added it to our path. We follow along this path with paw prints, hoping to find our dog, and we hope nothing bad happens again. Let's take the next few moments to immerse ourselves in the eerie and unsettling atmosphere created by the background music, footsteps, and terrain. The creature that just appeared is an imported model with a running animation that we adjusted to create a smooth and realistic running sequence using transformations on the model.
We hear sudden dog barking faintly coming into the foreground. Is this perhaps our dog? We are further made aware of this through the text prompt displayed on screen. The noise you are hearing was implemented as a directional audio, which is a child of another object, in which the volume of the sound is modified based on our camera's distance to the object. As can be seen, as we rotate in various directions, the source of the sound can be isolated and is clearly somewhere further down this path. Continuing on, we stumble upon yet another clue. Inspecting it, we note that this is our dog's ball, not looking very promising for us just yet. Following this sound even further, we are faced with a rather unsettling looking scene draped with blood. There are blood blocks and a massive blood puddle, as well as a radio, which have all been hierarchically modeled, and the radio is seemingly the origin of this noise. Have we been lured into a trap? As we approach the radio, observe the static effect emphasizing this. If we come close enough to it, we are suddenly trapped by a cage. The animation you have seen involved in just adjusting the viewing matrix of the camera to align with the descending cage, which decreases in height each frame and unlocks the controls preventing our player from moving. We are now suddenly trapped and we transition over to level 2 where we find ourselves in a room.
Before handing off this playthrough to Jamie to continue with level 2, I'd like to showcase the dynamic skybox. The skybox can be viewed by the player with fog enabled when the player is at the boundaries of the map. However, I've disabled the fog in level 1 for the purpose of clearly displaying the skybox and its dynamic properties. It can be observed that the trees and player's house disappear as the skybox moves past them by following the player.
Before I begin discussing the gameplay of Level 2, I would like to note that the vast majority of the house interior was modeled by myself in Blender, with a few smaller models downloaded from other creators. In the creation of my Blender scene, various elements were hierarchically modeled, such as the kitchen drawer, which is made up of sub-objects, including the drawer face, the rails, and the drawer interior. The child sub-elements are linked to a parent element which controls the transformation of the object as a whole. Level 2 begins, and we find ourselves in an unfamiliar bedroom, with ominous writing on the wall, which suggests that our objective is to escape the house. In order to create the effect of writing on the wall, PNGs were created in an image editor, and the alpha channel was used to create transparency on planes. The bedroom is lit with a point light on the ceiling. We take note of the fact that the number 6 is also written on the wall. This might be needed later. When we attempt to open the bedroom door, a sound plays, which indicates that the door is locked. We are unable to move through the door at this point. This is a reflection of our usage of a physics engine. Upon closer inspection of the painting on the wall, we notice that we can interact with it. This triggers an animation which was created in Blender, which shifts the painting to the right, revealing a hidden key. Interacting with the key removes it from the wall. We are now able to open the locked door and exit the bedroom. The animation of the bedroom door illustrates how sub-elements of the door rotate as one. Exploration of the bathroom reveals a soap bar. Interaction with the soap bar displays the magnifying glass, which was introduced in Level 1, and allows us to rotate the bar using our mouse. Rotation of the soap bar reveals the number 8 carved onto the back. We now leave the bathroom and move down to the ground floor of the house, where we find a basic lounge, a dining area, and a kitchen. The point light attached to the flashlight is important for navigating the area, considering that we chose to use minimal environmental lighting to create the desired aesthetic. We note that the torchlight is reflected in the windows as well as the fridge, with the reflections varying based on material properties. On the table next to the armchair, we find a remote which can be picked up. After picking up the remote, the player notes that it does not have any batteries and that we should find some. At this point, the TV cannot be interacted with. Moving into the kitchen, we find a note on the fridge saying that new batteries can be found in the kitchen drawers. Interaction with the drawer triggers a Blender animation which opens the drawer. This interaction also triggers a translation of the batteries so that they move with the drawer. We are now able to pick up the batteries for the remote. Heading back to the TV, we find that we can now interact with it. The first time we do this, a video texture is applied to the screen of the TV. If we interact again, a new texture is applied to the screen, which shows the number 3. A third interaction turns the TV off. These channels can be cycled through as many times as needed. We now move on to the basement door, which is locked and requires a pin. The player must remember that there was the number 6 in the bedroom, the number 8 in the bathroom, and the number 3 on the TV. Thus, 683 is the required pin which unlocks the basement door. We can now descend into the basement, where we find a surveillance room. The texture of the computer screen was created by placing a camera in the bedroom and using this camera view as a dynamic texture. There is also a DB board on the wall, which can be interacted with to trigger another Blender animation. This interaction also changes the emission color of the light on the wall from red to green. We now return to the ground floor, where we notice that the emission color of the light above the front door has also changed from red to green, indicating that it is unlocked. However, when we choose to interact with the door, we will be knocked unconscious by someone standing behind us. This effect will be accomplished by rotating the player camera, and we will move on to level 3. I will now demonstrate the lose condition of level 2. We are back at the basement door, which requires a pin to be entered to unlock it. If the basement door pin is entered incorrectly 3 times, the lose condition will be triggered. A third incorrect pin entry will trigger an alarm sound, and the player will restart the level.
Okay, so we just loaded into level 3 of the game. We were just knocked out from level 2 and we find ourselves in a maze, still trying to look for our dog Milo. And this maze was hierarchically modeled in Blender. So the 3D structure of the maze, the floor and the walls, is an imported base model, but everything that you see in it, like all the models and all of the textures, had to be manually added, and some of the models I made myself, like this piece of paper. And it says, how far would you go for your dog? So this note was created through the use of a class that took in a string as a parameter and displayed it as an overlay. And it has the sound effects attached to it and everything. It's also using the same interactive objects class that was used in the previous 2 levels. So you can see for some of the models, the shadows have been turned on. So for this shelf, you can see shadows are on. At the end of this corridor, there's a mirror. And the way this works is it basically has another perspective camera from behind the plane that looks in this direction. And whatever it sees, it just renders it onto this plane. And it's pretty cool. You can see our character in the reflection. I tried to make the atmosphere of this level very spooky with the background music and the flickering flashlights. And the main objective of this level is this puzzle here in the center of the map. So you can see there's 4 switches on the walls, and you see Milo in a cell here. He says, "Don't worry, I'll save you." Okay. So we come here to read this note, and it says, "Let's play a little game. How well do you know your dog? Answer the questions correctly and you can have him back. If your time runs out, then Milo will become like Tommy here on the table." And this is Tommy. So this should be the first note that you come across. Note 104. What is the color of Milo's collar? Red or blue? So the way you must answer these questions is you should have been very observant in level 1 of the game, because all of the answers would have been items in the map that you could have interacted with. So if you're observant, you would have remembered that Milo's color on one of the pathways was blue. So since this is note 1 of 4, this light 1 has to be blue. And the way these lights work is it basically just toggles through a color array with 4 colors. It has red, blue, green and yellow, so this one's blue. And to solve this puzzle, you have to have the correct color sequence, and then you win the game. So let's do that. Here's note 204, and it says, when is Milo's adoption day? So you should have interacted with a notebook in the tent in level 1, and then you would know that the answer is 19 September, so it's R, since there's an R attached to it, so it's red. Light 2 is red. Red. Now this is note 3 of the 4 notes, and it says, what is Milo's favorite toy? You would have also found this on one of the pathways and interacted with it. So the answer is ball, and it's attached to Y, and this is light 3. Okay. So this is a transformation function that I made to make a jump scare. It basically just translated the mannequin from its original spot 50 units down towards the camera. So it happens only the first time that you interact with this node, and it plays with the jump scare audio and everything. Note 4 says, what's fluffy and soon to be dead if you don't hurry up? That's G. So the correct color sequence is BRYG, and any other combination won't work. So if I made it red, it won't work. So it's BR yellow, and then green. And then you won. You escaped with Milo. After facing the threat and horror of the dog napper, the bond between you and your loyal, four-legged friend prevailed. With quick thinking, resourcefulness, and unwavering determination, you managed to outsmart the danger and secure the safety of your beloved dog. Nice.